Hello, and today I'll be showing you how to properly compress a particle simulation. So, this setup here is just a basic, just a sphere, scattering some points, adding some jitter, and inside the pop network just adding some forces. Nothing special. So, here I'm importing my simulation, and you can see that we have a lot of different attributes, which I don't need, and also a group. So, I'll first delete the group, because I don't need any group, so I'll delete all of them. And then I'll place a delete attribute. Attribute delete. And I generally speaking delete all the attributes except for detail. Detail, generally speaking, don't take up any space, so you don't need to care about those ones. And also, sometimes you may have attributes which are uniform throughout or uniform on all of the points, which usually it's a p-scale. In that case, it would be very useful to promote that attribute from point to a detail, from point to detail. You essentially don't lose any data, and it's much more efficient that way. And in this case, in the attribute delete, I want to keep some point attributes, so I want to keep the velocity, let's say, the h, and the ID. So the next step would be, you can see that all the attributes are 32-bit, and casting attributes to 16-bit from 32-bit is essentially halving their size, because essentially from 32-bit means that you have 32 spaces of either 0 or 1s, and if you set it to 16-bit, you go from 32 to just 16. So what it means, you essentially lose some precision, but you're saving up essentially half of the size, or you're reducing the size by half. So that's why you always should go from 32-bit to 16-bit, and you won't even notice the difference. I generally speaking don't cast my position, but all the other attributes is always useful to cast them to a 16-bit float. So h, and don't cast your ID, because it will then set it to be a float, but ID is a integer. For that, we can also cast integers to be a 16-bit integer, but generally speaking, I don't do that. Because a 16-bit has around 64,000 different variations, and since I have 2.5 million points, that means I have 2.5 million different numbers, so I wouldn't, generally speaking, set to 16-bit integer your ID. But what could be useful is a 18-bit unsigned integer, because in some cases you might have an integer value which is ranging from 0 to 256. Then I would advise to set it to a unsigned integer, 8-bit. In that case, it's going to be much more efficient that way. Or you can sign it to 8-bit signed integer, which will, if you have an attribute which is ranging from -128 to +127, then set it to signed integer. Yeah, I don't have any attributes like that, so I won't be setting it to. Then the next step, what we can do is convert VDB points. So this will essentially convert our points into VDB voxels, or if that makes sense, you can see we have VDBs suddenly. And if you didn't know, VDBs are very, very efficient. And by setting this here, you're setting how many points are going to be in each voxel. So, or in each voxel cell. So, yeah. I think I'm going to show you the comparison right now. So if I save this here, and it's going to be 185 megabytes, and if I save the compressed one, it's going to be just 32, which is a lot better. One additional thing you can do, if you already have an animated camera, like for example I have here, I can create a volume, and let me actually set this to light so we can see the volume much better. And I'm going to copy my second camera here, place it in here. I'll set the range from 0.5 to like 50. So this is essentially how far the volume will represent our camera. So set this to 1, set this to density, and let's set this to maybe 50. Maybe it's a overkill a bit, but maybe not. And now I want to create a attribute wrangle and essentially sample the position of each point to my volume, or from my volume. So I'll place a if function volume sample, sampling the second input, density, and based on the position. And then if smaller than 0.1, then remove point from my first input based on point number. Like so. It's not removing because we need to remove these VDB points, as you can see. Now it's removing, and plug it after. And so the way this works, a volume sample will look into the position of a certain point, and it will check in which voxel that point lives. And if it checks, for example, it lives in a voxel with a value of 0.5, it will assign that value to that point. And if the point, or if the volume sample doesn't find a voxel where the point is living in, it will assign a value of 0. So everywhere in our volume, we have values above of 0. So we're saying if the value is essentially 0, then remove a point. So that way we're determining if the point is inside of our volume or outside. Then I'm converting it back, then I'm converting it, and let's save it again. So we went around from 185 megabytes to just 18. So the compression was almost 10, so we essentially managed to make the file size 10 times smaller. So yeah, I hope this helped, and bye.